Your soulmate is traveling right now toward you, because. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because somewhere, at this very moment, your soulmate has reached a realization they can no longer ignore. A realization that didn't appear overnight. A realization that wasn't created by one conversation, one memory, or one emotional moment. It was built slowly. Quietly. Patiently. One thought at a time. One feeling at a time. One realization at a time. And listen to this. For a very long time, they stayed exactly where they were. Not only physically. Emotionally. Mentally. Spiritually. They kept telling themselves that waiting was the smartest option. Waiting felt safe. Waiting felt comfortable. Waiting required no risk. No uncertainty. No difficult decisions. No uncomfortable conversations. Yet despite all the comfort, something inside them felt restless. A small voice kept asking questions. Questions they couldn't answer. Questions that followed them everywhere. Questions that became louder with every passing day. Because your heart needs this right now, because the soul often knows when it's time to move long before the mind agrees. Your soulmate was beginning to hear that voice. And listen to this. At first they ignored it. Whenever the feeling appeared, they distracted themselves. Whenever their heart suggested change, they focused on routine. Whenever they felt called towards something bigger, they convinced themselves they were imagining it. After all, routines are comfortable. Predictable. Familiar. People become attached to familiarity. Even when familiarity no longer makes them happy. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth rarely begins inside comfort zones. Growth begins the moment comfort starts feeling too small. Your soulmate was reaching that point. And listen to this. One ordinary morning, something felt different. Nothing dramatic happened. No life-changing event. No shocking revelation. The world looked exactly the same. Yet they felt different. And that difference was impossible to explain. It was as if their heart had become tired of waiting. Tired of postponing. Tired of wondering. Tired of standing still. For the first time, they stopped asking, "Why should I move?" And started asking, "Why am I staying?" That question changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because sometimes the right question changes your entire perspective. Your soulmate had found the right question. And listen to this. The more they reflected, the more they realized something surprising. Most of the reasons they stayed where they were weren't actually reasons. They were fears. Fear disguised as logic. Fear disguised as caution. Fear disguised as patience. And once they recognized that truth, those fears began losing power. Slowly. Gradually. But undeniably. Because your heart needs this right now, because fear often controls us only until we recognize it. Your soulmate was finally recognizing it. And listen to this. As the days passed, a strange sense of urgency began growing inside them. Not panic. Not anxiety. Purpose. The feeling that something important was waiting ahead. The feeling that continuing to stand still was no longer an option. The feeling that a chapter was ending, and a new one was preparing to begin. That feeling followed them everywhere. In quiet moments. In busy moments. In conversations. In silence. It never fully disappeared. Because your heart needs this right now, because certain journeys begin inside the heart long before they begin in the world. Your soulmate's journey had already begun internally. And listen to this. One evening they sat alone and thought about the future. Not the distant future. The immediate future. The next few months. The next few years. The next opportunities. The next chances. And suddenly they saw something clearly. If nothing changed, everything would stay the same. Simple. Obvious. Yet powerful. And for some reason, that realization hit them deeply. Because they didn't want the same anymore. They wanted growth. Movement. Possibility. Adventure. Connection. Meaning. Because your heart needs this right now, because eventually every soul reaches a moment where remaining still becomes more painful than moving forward. Your soulmate had arrived at that moment. And listen to this. The decision wasn't made instantly. Important decisions rarely are. Instead, it unfolded slowly. Like sunrise. Gradual. Steady. Certain. Each day brought a little more clarity. Each day brought a little more confidence. Each day brought a little more courage. Until eventually there was no debate left. Only a decision. A simple decision. Move. Go. Begin. Trust. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful journey starts with a single act of courage. Your soulmate had finally found theirs. And listen to this. The moment they made that decision, something unexpected happened. Relief. Not fear. Relief. The relief that comes when uncertainty finally ends. The relief that comes when your actions align with your heart. The relief that comes when you stop fighting what you already know. For so long they had been resisting the journey. Now they were embracing it. And that changed everything. Suddenly the future looked different. Brighter. Wider. Full of possibility. Because your heart needs this right now, because courage doesn't always create certainty. But it creates momentum. And momentum changes lives. Your soulmate was finally moving forward. And as they looked ahead, preparing for the journey that awaited them, one thought remained stronger than all the others. Maybe the things I'm searching for aren't behind me. Maybe they're ahead of me. Maybe it's finally time to find out. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after making the decision to move forward, your soulmate still had one challenge left to face. Doubt. Not overwhelming doubt. Not enough doubt to stop them completely. But enough doubt to make them pause. Enough doubt to make them wonder whether they were really doing the right thing. And listen to this. The strange thing about important decisions is that they often become more frightening after we make them. Before the decision, we imagine possibilities. After the decision, we imagine consequences. Your soulmate discovered this firsthand. The moment they committed to moving forward, questions began appearing. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm expecting too much? What if the journey leads somewhere unexpected? What if I should wait a little longer? The questions seemed endless. And for a short while, they wondered whether they should slow down. Whether they should reconsider. Whether they should return to the familiar comfort of standing still. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful journey passes through a doorway called uncertainty. Your soulmate was standing in that doorway. And listen to this. The days that followed felt different. Everything around them seemed ordinary. Yet internally, something had shifted. They found themselves paying attention to details they normally ignored. Small moments. Small conversations. Small coincidences. Things that once seemed insignificant suddenly felt meaningful. Almost as if life was trying to show them something. Almost as if the universe was gently nudging them forward. At first they dismissed the feeling. They told themselves they were imagining things. Yet the feeling persisted. Because your heart needs this right now, because intuition rarely shouts. It whispers. Your soulmate kept hearing that whisper. And listen to this. One afternoon, while reflecting quietly, they realized something important. Every time they imagined moving forward, they felt nervous. But they also felt excited. Every time they imagined staying exactly where they were, they felt safe. But they also felt disappointed. That contrast revealed something powerful. Excitement lived in one direction. Regret lived in the other. And suddenly the decision became easier. Because your heart needs this right now, because our emotions often reveal truths our logic cannot explain. Your soulmate was finally listening. And listen to this. Then came the moment they would later describe as a sign. Not necessarily a magical sign. Not necessarily a dramatic sign. A personal sign. A moment that spoke directly to their heart. It happened unexpectedly. A memory surfaced. A conversation resurfaced. A feeling resurfaced. And with it came a realization. I've already spent enough time wondering. I've already spent enough time waiting. I've already spent enough time standing still. That realization landed deeply. Because suddenly they understood something. Waiting wasn't giving them answers anymore. Action would. Because your heart needs this right now, because some answers only reveal themselves once the journey begins. Your soulmate was ready to discover those answers. And listen to this. The very next morning felt different. The fear was still there. The uncertainty was still there. Yet something stronger had appeared. Commitment. Real commitment. The kind that doesn't disappear when challenges appear. The kind that doesn't vanish when fear speaks up. The kind that keeps moving even when the destination isn't completely visible. For the first time, they stopped negotiating with themselves. Stopped delaying. stopped creating new reasons to wait. Instead, they focused on one simple thing: preparing. Because your heart needs this right now, because preparation is what transforms dreams into reality. Your soulmate had entered that stage. And listen to this. As they began preparing for the journey, a strange excitement filled their heart. Not because they knew exactly what would happen. Because they didn't. Not because they had every answer. Because they didn't. The excitement came from possibility. The possibility of growth. The possibility of discovery. The possibility that something meaningful was waiting ahead. Possibility is powerful. Powerful enough to move people beyond fear. Powerful enough to change lives. Powerful enough to inspire journeys that once seemed impossible. Your soulmate was being guided by possibility now. And listen to this. While getting ready, they found themselves reflecting on the person they used to be. The version of themselves who avoided risks. The version who waited for certainty. The version who postponed important decisions. And they realized something surprising. That version was slowly disappearing. Not because they were becoming fearless. Because they were becoming braver. There is a difference. Fearless people feel no fear. Brave people move despite fear. Your soulmate had become brave. Because your heart needs this right now, because bravery is not perfection. It's progress. And progress changes everything. And listen to this. As the preparations continued, another realization appeared. Perhaps the most important realization yet. The journey wasn't really about reaching a place. It was about becoming a person. A person willing to trust themselves. A person willing to follow their heart. A person willing to embrace uncertainty. A person willing to choose growth over comfort. That realization transformed the entire experience. Suddenly the destination felt less important. The transformation felt more important. Because your heart needs this right now, because the greatest journeys often change the traveler more than the destination. Your soulmate was already changing. And listen to this. By the time everything was ready, the doubts that once felt overwhelming had become quiet. Not gone. Just quiet. Because now they were being drowned out by something stronger. Hope. Hope for what might happen. Hope for what might be discovered. Hope for what the future might hold. And hope has a remarkable ability to create momentum. Momentum that carries people further than they ever imagined possible. Your soulmate was feeling that momentum. And for the first time, the journey no longer felt frightening. It felt necessary. It felt meaningful. It felt right. Because your heart needs this right now, because when the heart and the path finally align, moving forward becomes easier than standing still. Your soulmate had reached that moment. And as they took the next step toward the journey ahead, one thought echoed clearly through their mind. The answers I've been searching for won't appear while I stay where I am. The next chapter is waiting. And it's finally time to begin. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after all the preparation, all the reflection, and all the courage it took to begin moving forward, your soulmate finally found themselves on the journey they had spent so long imagining. The journey had officially begun. The waiting was over. The planning was over. The hesitation was over. Now there was only movement. Forward movement. And listen to this. At first, everything felt surreal. For so long, this journey had existed only as an idea. A possibility. A distant thought. Something that belonged to someday. Yet suddenly, someday had become today. And that realization felt powerful. Because your heart needs this right now, because dreams feel very different once they become reality. Your soulmate was experiencing that difference. And listen to this. As the miles passed, they found themselves staring out quietly, lost in thought. Not because they were worried. Not because they regretted the decision. Because the movement itself created space for reflection. Space they hadn't had before. Space to think. Space to feel. Space to understand. And in that space, memories began returning. One after another. Like pages turning inside a book they hadn't opened in a long time. Some memories made them smile. Some made them pause. Some made them realize how much they had grown. Because your heart needs this right now, because journeys often reveal truths we've been too busy to notice. Your soulmate was beginning to notice them. And listen to this. The first thing they realized was how much time they had spent doubting themselves. For years, they searched for certainty before taking action. They wanted guarantees. Proof. Perfect timing. Perfect conditions. Yet now, sitting in the middle of this journey, they understood something surprising. Perfect timing never arrives. Perfect certainty never arrives. Life moves forward anyway. The people who grow aren't the ones who wait for certainty. They're the ones who move despite uncertainty. Your soulmate was finally becoming one of those people. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth begins where certainty ends. And listen to this. The further they traveled, the lighter they felt. Not physically. Emotionally. The burden of hesitation was disappearing. The burden of endless wondering was disappearing. The burden of asking, what if, was disappearing. Because for once, they were no longer trapped inside possibilities. They were living one. And that felt freeing. For a very long time, they had lived inside questions. Now they were finally living inside action. Because your heart needs this right now, because action often heals doubts that thinking never can. Your soulmate was learning that firsthand. And listen to this. At one point during the journey, they remembered a conversation they once had. A simple conversation. Nothing dramatic. Nothing life-changing. Yet the memory returned with unexpected clarity. And as they replayed it in their mind, they realized something. Many of the moments that shape our lives don't feel important when they happen. Their importance only becomes visible later. Weeks later. Months later. Sometimes years later. Looking back, they suddenly saw meaning where they once saw ordinary moments. And that realization touched them deeply. Because your heart needs this right now, because life often hides its most important lessons inside ordinary experiences. Your soulmate was beginning to understand those lessons. And listen to this. As the journey continued, they started thinking about fear. Not fear itself. Their relationship with fear. For years, fear had influenced countless decisions. Fear of failure. Fear of rejection. Fear of disappointment. Fear of uncertainty. Yet sitting there, moving steadily toward the future, they realized something powerful. Fear had never actually protected them. Not completely. Instead, it often prevented experiences that could have changed their life. That realization was difficult. Yet also liberating. Because your heart needs this right now, because recognizing old limitations is often the first step toward freedom. Your soulmate was finding that freedom. And listen to this. The landscape outside continued changing. Different places. Different views. Different surroundings. And somehow those changing scenes mirrored what was happening inside them. Because they were changing too. Not dramatically. Not instantly. Gradually. Quietly. Meaningfully. Every mile seemed to strengthen their confidence. Every mile seemed to reinforce their decision. Every mile seemed to confirm that moving forward had been the right choice. Because your heart needs this right now, because confidence is often built through action, not before it. Your soulmate was building confidence one step at a time. And listen to this. Then came a realization they never expected. A realization that changed the emotional meaning of the entire journey. They realized the destination wasn't actually the most important part. The transformation was. The person they were becoming was. The courage they were discovering was. The trust they were developing in themselves was. Because even if the future remained uncertain, one thing was already true. They were no longer the same person who started this journey. And that realization felt profound. Because your heart needs this right now, because every meaningful journey changes the traveler. Your soulmate was already changing. And listen to this. As evening approached, they found themselves smiling unexpectedly. Not because every question had been answered. Not because every uncertainty had disappeared. Because they felt alive. Truly alive. Present. Engaged. Moving. Growing. Exploring. For the first time in a long while, they weren't waiting for life to happen. They were participating in it. And that felt incredible. Because your heart needs this right now, because life often becomes more meaningful when we stop observing it from a distance and start stepping into it fully. Your soulmate had stepped into it. And listen to this. One final thought stayed with them throughout the journey. A thought that returned repeatedly. A thought that grew stronger with every mile. It was simple. Maybe this journey isn't happening because I know exactly where it leads. Maybe it's happening because I'm finally willing to discover where it leads. That thought brought them peace. Because discovery requires openness. Growth requires movement. And meaningful chapters require beginnings. Your soulmate was finally embracing all three. And as the journey continued, they felt something they hadn't felt in a very long time. Hope. Real hope. Not hope based on certainty. Hope based on possibility. And possibility felt endless. Don't skip. Listen carefully. This message is for you, and your heart needs this right now, because after every mile of the journey, after every memory, every reflection, and every moment of courage, your soulmate finally understands something they couldn't fully understand before. The journey was never only about movement. It was never only about distance. It was never only about reaching a destination. It was about discovering a truth. A truth that had been patiently waiting for them all along. And listen to this. As the journey continued, they found themselves thinking less about where they were going and more about why they were going. That question stayed with them. Again and again. Why does this matter so much? Why couldn't I ignore it? Why couldn't I simply stay where I was? And the answer slowly revealed itself. Because some things speak to the heart in a way logic never can. Some opportunities create emotions that refuse to disappear. Some paths continue calling our name until we finally follow them. Because your heart needs this right now, because the strongest callings are often the ones we spend the longest trying to resist. Your soulmate had finally stopped resisting. And listen to this. For years, they believed certainty was necessary before action. Now they understood something completely different. Action often creates certainty. Not the other way around. If they had stayed behind waiting for every answer, they might have waited forever. If they had demanded guarantees, they might never have begun. If they had allowed fear to remain in charge, this journey would still exist only as a dream. But something changed. And that change changed everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because growth begins the moment courage becomes stronger than comfort. Your soulmate had reached that point. And listen to this. As the destination grew closer, their emotions became more complicated. Not negative. Just deeper. They felt excitement. Hope. Curiosity. Gratitude. Even nervousness. Yet underneath every emotion existed one powerful feeling. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you followed your heart. The kind of peace that comes from choosing courage. The kind of peace that comes from refusing to let fear make another important decision. Because your heart needs this right now, because peace often arrives after we stop running from what matters. Your soulmate had stopped running. And listen to this. The closer they came, the more clearly they saw the lessons hidden inside the entire experience. The lesson wasn't about distance. The lesson wasn't about timing. The lesson wasn't even about the destination. The lesson was trust. Trusting themselves. Trusting their instincts. Trusting their ability to navigate uncertainty. Trusting that not every meaningful step requires complete clarity. That lesson transformed them. Because for so long, they had doubted their own inner voice. Now they were learning how to listen to it. And that made them stronger. Because your heart needs this right now, because self-trust is one of the most valuable things a person can develop. Your soulmate was finally developing it. And listen to this. At one point, they imagined what might have happened if they had never started the journey. If they had ignored the feeling, ignored the calling, ignored the opportunity. The thought made them uncomfortable. Not because they feared failure. Because they feared regret. And suddenly they understood something important. The greatest risk was never taking the journey. The greatest risk was never beginning. The greatest risk was allowing fear to decide everything. Because your heart needs this right now, because missed opportunities often create deeper regrets than failed attempts. Your soulmate knew that now. And listen to this. The journey also taught them something about life itself. Life is rarely about having all the answers. Life is about moving forward despite unanswered questions. It's about trusting the next step even when the entire path isn't visible. It's about embracing possibility. It's about remaining open to discovery. And the more they accepted that truth, the lighter they felt. The future no longer seemed frightening. It seemed exciting. Because uncertainty wasn't the enemy anymore. It had become part of the adventure. Because your heart needs this right now, because the unknown becomes less intimidating when we stop fighting it. Your soulmate had stopped fighting it. And listen to this. As the final stage of the journey approached, they reflected on how much they had changed. The person who started this journey wasn't the same person who was finishing it. The version of themselves who constantly hesitated had grown. The version who always waited for certainty had grown. The version who doubted every instinct had grown. Now they carried something new. Confidence. Not arrogance. Not perfection. Confidence. The quiet confidence that comes from proving something to yourself. The confidence that comes from taking action. The confidence that comes from choosing courage. Because your heart needs this right now, because confidence is built through experience, not imagination. Your soulmate had earned theirs. And listen to this. If they could send one message from the deepest part of their heart during this journey, it might sound something like this. I finally understand something important. The things that matter most are rarely found by standing still. The things that matter most often require courage. They require movement. They require faith. They require trust. And sometimes they require a journey. For a long time, I thought waiting would bring answers. Now I know that answers often appear while we're moving forward. Now I know that growth begins when we stop letting fear lead our lives. Now I know that some paths deserve to be followed, even when we can't see the ending. Because your heart needs this right now, because some truths can only be learned through experience. Your soulmate learned those truths on this journey. And listen to this. By now, they no longer see this as a trip. They see it as a turning point. A chapter. A moment they will remember for a very long time. Not because everything was certain. Not because everything was easy. But because they finally chose themselves. They finally trusted themselves. They finally stepped into the unknown instead of running from it. And that choice changed them forever. Because your heart needs this right now, because the biggest journeys are not the ones that change our location. They're the ones that change who we become. Your soulmate has been changed by this journey. And as they continue moving forward, one final realization stays with them. Maybe the reason I started this journey wasn't to find something outside myself. Maybe the reason was to discover the courage that was inside me all along. And now that I've found it, there's no turning back.